We're taking off past desert shorelines westbound across the Atlantic as we travel with Air Canada from Casablanca, Morocco to Montreal. Air Canada is Canada's flag carrier and largest airline by far. Though aside from the sheer size of the airline, can it still be said that Air Canada is Canada's best airline? I imagine that if you're viewing today's video from the confines of the provinces and territories, you may strongly disagree with that statement. You see, for the past few decades, Air Canada's cost-cutting measures have put their reputation on a downward slide. Nonetheless, today we're hitching a ride back across the Atlantic with them, traveling in Signature Class, their business class product. Here we'll test everything from the ground experience, catering, in-flight service, and their hard product to see if Air Canada is worth a shot at redemption or if you should avoid their product at all costs. We've got 8 hours in the air on this daytime flight before we touch down in Montreal, so let's hop on board in search of linking adventure. We're starting today's journey in Casablanca, Morocco's Mohammed V Airport, where we will board an Air Canada A330 around 9:30 in the morning and take off westbound across the Atlantic before landing in Montreal some 8 hours later around 11:30 local time. Before we hop on board, come join me in what may be the most underwhelming ground experience that Air Canada could have offered as we wait for our boarding to begin. I'm in Casablanca, Morocco. I'm in the Pearl Lounge at Mohammed V Airport. I am waiting for my Air Canada flight. Overall, it's a pretty easy experience getting in here this morning. They have a fast track lane through security. I got in and using my business class ticket, I went to the Pearl Lounge, which is the lounge assigned to Air Canada. I will say that, despite Air Canada's app saying to get here extra early, it's really not necessary. I could have gotten here an hour before boarding and would have had time to spare. This lounge it's nice. It's quiet, but there's not really anything special. There's a couple pastries and some coffee, and it's pretty basic as far as lounge offerings go, so I would definitely not get here early just for that. Yes, as I mentioned, the lounge is quiet, so if you're trying to catch up on some emails pre-flight, this lounge is adequate, and the Wi-Fi was functional, to say the least. I found the food offerings meager as far as offerings on a business class ticket go. Yes, Casablanca is an outstation, and not an Air Canada hub, and while they may not have direct control over the lounge offerings, they really could have done better in exerting their influence to create a better ground product for their customers. Before long, I'm up in the main terminal, unaware of the long line that would be waiting for me to clear the secondary security screening I need to pass through before boarding my flight. I was a little pressed for time, but not so much so that I didn't pause for a moment to admire the A330 adorned in Air Canada's black and white livery with their distinct cockpit mask paint job. Mind you, unlike the primary security screening, there was no fast track lane allotted to business class passengers, and I was a bit pressed for time. However, I made it through the secondary screening just as boarding for the business class cabin was called, and I was off, down the jet bridge with the same anticipation I get every time I board a flight, eager and excited for the journey to come. The business class cabin on Air Canada's fleet of A330-300 aircraft featured 32 Collins Super Diamond business class seats arranged in a 1-2-1 layout with all the seats afforded direct aisle access. For solo passengers, the A and K seats offer the most private space, whereas the D and G seats are great for couples or passengers traveling together. Otherwise, you'll be stuck awkwardly avoiding eye contact with the passenger next to you for hours on end. The seats in row 1 offer a bit more room in the footbox due to the lack of a seat in front of them, but for today's flight, I'm seated in seat 8A, which I found to be a very private seat due to not having a seat directly across the aisle. Behind the business class cabin, Air Canada also features 24 premium economy seats arranged in a 2-3-2 layout with 38 inches of pitch and 7 inches of recline, behind which there are 241 standard economy seats arranged in a 2-4-2 layout with a standard 31 inches of pitch. We've boarded. Overall impressions, it's a pretty smooth boarding process. It's a pretty empty cabin up here, so that definitely helped out the flight crew a little bit with the normal boarding and getting everything sorted out. A little bit of congestion in the terminal. As with a lot of flights going to North America, there's a secondary screening process, and the line was outrageously long with 2 or 3 customs officials, security officials checking passports and documents, and that took a little bit longer than I had anticipated, but I finished up that just in time to get there for boarding. So aside from that, everything was a pretty smooth process. I arrived at my seat today to find a pillow, duvet, and mattress pad laying out on a gray fabric seat. On the tray table, I found an Air Canada branded amenity kit, which we'll get to later, as well as a bottle of water, and on the window side of my seat, I found a set of noise-canceling headphones, unceremoniously plopped down on the console. I found the Collins Super Diamond seat on this flight to be both spacious and private. There's plenty of room to move around, and I don't feel confined to my seat at all.
I will say that for some reason the color selection made by Air Canada works here, albeit it's a bit drab. The choice of light and dark colors give this cabin a very open feel to it, and make it seem way more roomy than it actually is. The IFE screen in front of my seat seems new and responsive, and to the left of my seat there is an LCD screen with controls for my seat, which even feature options to recline as well as a massaging seat function. Above that there is a cover concealing a remote for the IFE screen, which seems a bit like a waste of space considering that this space could have been afforded for more storage for gizmos and gadgets. Behind this cover there is a small storage compartment with a plug and a headphone jack, which I found to be just big enough for my phone and a few other items. Behind this is a fairly standard reading light and a space for the flight safety brochures. In front of my seat, beneath the IFE screen, is a very sturdy tray table, which folds up into a smaller table for storing items when you might not need the full tray table. To the right of my seat, there is an armrest with a bit more storage. This armrest also moves up and down and offers a bit more shoulder width in lie flat mode, which I greatly appreciated. Unfortunately, despite being from Canada, this aircraft does not feature any individual air vents, a feature which I always miss dearly when not available. And as I mentioned before, the IFE screen on this flight not only looks responsive, it is actually very responsive and fast to the touch.
So, overall first impressions, seat's very wide. I don't feel like my shoulders are congested here at all. There's this little, I guess, kind of like elbow nook that seems to be in the right place. So we've got plenty of room to kind of spread out. This shoulder partition here offers a lot of extra privacy. I'm in seat 8. I'm kind of behind all the other seats. That gives me a lot of like extra privacy for filming and whatnot. And I just kind of feel like this cabin's got a very airy feel about it. It's very Spartan, but very airy and open feeling.
As we continued to wait for boarding to finish, the flight crew brought around a pre-departure beverage offering, and I chose to go with sparkling wine. As I was served, I was given a set of catering menus for today's flight, which were printed in 3 languages: English, French, and Arabic. Having fully studied the entire contents of the menu, and with boarding nowhere close to finished, yes, this is taking an eternity at this point, I figured that I'll take a few moments to showcase this Air Canada branded amenity kit from Acqua di Parma. This kit features a set of socks, an eye mask, hand lotion, earplugs, and a dental kit featuring not only a toothbrush and toothpaste, but also mouthwash and a small floss pick. With boarding now completed, it was time to push back and taxi out to the runway. As we pushed back, I couldn't help but admire the livery of the Royal Air Morocco 787 next to us. As I did, I reflected on the flight I'd taken with them just a few days before. For those of you interested in that flight, I'll post a card with the video link in the description above. Without any delay, we're off and into the skies over Casablanca as we bank towards the west and out towards the ocean and eventually Montreal. And with the wheels up, you know what that means. It's time to sink back, relax, and kick my shoes off and stretch out into the ample legroom of my seat. I will say that while this seat does feature plenty of legroom, I did find that the footbox is a bit cramped. But that wouldn't really be an issue until I went to take a nap several hours in the future from this point. I threw on a pair of Air Canada provided noise cancelling headphones, and while not the best by far, they would be perfectly fine for this afternoon's flight for me to watch a few movies. The crew brought around hot towels and I wiped my hands off, before being provided a bowl of mixed nuts and my selection of drink of choice from the beverage cart. For this, I decided to stick with the sparkling wine that I'd gotten before boarding. Cheers, y'all. Before too long, flight crew brought out the first meal service, and I've got to say that I really appreciate how quickly they brought out the first service. Granted, this is a daytime flight, and I wasn't likely to get too much sleep. However, were this a nighttime service, I'd have appreciated how quickly service was started. The meal started off with an appetizer of Moroccan shakshuka with a chickpea puree and a pumpkin mezza, which I found to be full of flavor. This was served with a green salad and a selection of rolls. The appetizer was followed by a main course of chicken tahine with almond and chickpea couscous and a selection of vegetables. Flight crew came around with an after-dinner selection of cheeses and a mango chocolate cake for dessert. Everything on the catering menu, while not the most excellent in-flight catering, was tasty and not overcooked. In short, it's exactly what I expect of a business class product. With meal service done, I would have sank into lie-flat mode for some sleep were this a nighttime flight, but this being a daytime flight, I sank back into recline a bit. But before I'm too settled in, let's go check out the lavatory on this flight. I really do like the tree shadow design on the wall, but aside from that, there's nothing special going on here. though I will say that halfway through the flight, the crew had this lavatory very clean. Now back in my seat, I'll stretch out and enjoy my seat a bit. As you can see, I have plenty of space to spread out, and despite my broad 24-inch or 61cm wide shoulders, I'm not confined at all in seat mode. I thought that the wings of the seat, which were designed to provide privacy, would have made the seat a bit confining, however I did not find that to be the case. On the other hand, the added privacy they provided really added to the experience. Sinking into lie flat mode, however, I did not feel the same about the shoulder room as I had in seat mode. The armrest on the right side of my seat dug into my elbow, and the privacy wing got in the way of my extra shoulder space that the right side armrest would have provided. Eventually, I ended up sleeping on my side for a short while before I woke up for the second service. However, given the underwhelming second service, I'd regret not sleeping just a little bit longer. For this meal, Air Canada served us with a fruit bowl, a small cheese and vegetable plate, and a roll. I was a bit disappointed in the service, to say the least. As we make our final approach into Montreal, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on my experience. I will say that in regards to the ground service, Air Canada has a lot of room for improvement. I understand that it can be difficult to have a consistent product as far as an outstation ground service goes, but the ground service I experienced was next to non-existent. As far as the in-flight service, though, the crew was outstanding, and several members of the flight crew took time to address me personally, and that's a level of service that goes a long way in my book. The catering for this flight was adequate, but nothing exceptional. I enjoyed the local flair and Moroccan touch of the first service. However, the second service was a few stops short of abysmal. Lastly, the hard product on this flight. The seat, while comfortable and well padded, and perfect in seat mode, was not great in lie flat mode. The shoulder space was tight, and the foot box was a bit tight for my large feet. For a smaller passenger, this is a fine seat. However, as is often the case, it was a bit cramped for me. And one of the aims of this channel is to provide a review as a broad-shouldered passenger, and as far as the hard product goes, it was in good condition, but it was a bit too tight for me. In summary, while I don't think that Air Canada is as bad as some of the scathing reviews I've heard, it's certainly also not a top-notch airline. Granted, I flew on a long-haul international flight, not a domestic flight. I wouldn't say that I would strive to avoid Air Canada, but given my experience, they're also not an airline I'd be drawn to anytime in the near future. Perhaps, for those of you watching at home, it's worth a trip with Air Canada if the price is right. That decision, however, is yours to make on your own. Thanks again for joining me on my journey today. I get so much enjoyment out of being able to bring each and every one of you along with me. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel so that I can bring you along with me on my upcoming adventures. Thank you so much to the crew and staff at Air Canada as well for making today's flight such a pleasant experience. For those of you at home, until I see you again, safe travels. And until next time, I'll see you up in the clouds.